It's really wonderful to see a whole lot of people here today. That's not just our school board. Thank you for joining us for this workshop. We're going to be continuing this exploration of liberation and true belonging, all in community, as we do everything here. And we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But we're thankful to the Virginia Humanities for helping make this project possible. And we're thankful to Tim Eriksen for being here to lead us in this. Tim is a musician, shape note singer, scholar, a man of many hats and talents.
I only brought one, but...
so I'll turn it over to you unless there's anything else that needs to be said.
It's great. Nice to see you again. Nice to see some of you for the first time. Music is one of the most compelling ways to engage with both of the main themes of this residency. Liberty and belonging. Sure, you can all think of many examples, but if you just kind of go on the internet and look up liberation, liberty, and music, you find all kinds of different references. Liberation from all manner of things, and that's one of the things I was thinking of this morning, discussing or just working with or just considering as we go forward, is what kind of liberation from what, for whom. Some of the things that jump out are, of course, liberation from oppressive conditions, whether they be social or personal, but also liberation from other kinds of constraints, the things that would hold us personally or interpersonally back from achieving what we would like to. And then also belonging, the nature of belonging, both comes up as ownership and also as inclusion, and it kind of goes back and forth. You look at the way that both of these terms are used in music. There are so many songs called like "I belong to you," or "You belong to me," or "We belong together." So there's the level. There's also these different levels in music in which these ideas are manifested. So the lyrics. But then there's also the practice of the music. What is it about this song that facilitates or enables or in one way or another engages with these ideas? So if you think about that as we're looking at the different music that we're doing, on what level is it engaging? And I think from what I understand of the practice here at the school is that whatever music you're doing, it seems that the most obvious level is not necessarily the text or the sort of ideology, the ideas behind the songs, but the community engagement. And that's one of the things that drew me to Sacred Harp and shape note singing. And thinking about it in terms of liberty and belonging, I think liberation from a lot of the kinds of, let's say, fear on one hand associated with music. I don't know if anybody's experienced that. Yeah, that's kind of a joke because I think most people have. If you're called to just, I don't know, sing a song or something, there could be some nervousness associated with it. And in our culture in general, music tends to be very much oriented around performance and fame and things like that, which may have their place in the world. But I saw in Sacred Harp, I wouldn't have necessarily phrased it that way at the time, but it was very much in my thought that here's a chance to be free from some of those constraints, the things that prevent us from not only from making music, but from doing something together that's a very just basic kind of human activity. So, so if you just as we go forward, maybe just be thinking about some of that stuff. Maybe a chance to talk about it some. I plan to talk less today than yesterday, And I'm interested in hearing from you. I know there are some folks here who have some songs that they would like to work on. So it seems like a good chance for us to maybe brainstorm a bit with that. And I wanted to start by showing you a couple of examples of my own music and just reflecting a little bit on how it relates to the themes. So, are there Sacred Harmonies?
I can grab some from the car.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You right there?
Okay, I'll do something else in the meantime. How many people here are working on songs at the moment? So songs in progress? Yeah.
You mean writing something?
Yeah. Kind of. Okay, well, writing or performing, I know some of you are working on songs to perform. That's good. We should have a chance to investigate some of that. Well, maybe I'll just... I've been involved in a lot of different kinds of music over the years, from punk rock to South Indian classical music, which is my only training, to Shape Note Singers, which is my real love for kind of social music making. I've sung symphony orchestras and I don't know, all kinds of different ways. I thought I'd just show you a song that is very simple that I wrote way back when. It's just D and E, so I don't think everybody's got a D and an E instrument. I don't want to mess around, it just goes like this over and over again. Approximating those chords. It's basically the whole song. My idea when I wrote it was to do something that was just two chords. I've since written songs that had no chords, but at the time this was kind of the... dreams are like a dirt bike and wild dreams. Not the easiest chorus in the world, but that's really good. And tell me you'll be free up again. Why do I love the way you hold that gun? And tell me you'll be free up again. My dreams smell like a dirt bike and wild dreams. And part of that, just relating it to liberation, is just kind of wanting to be free from convention, from some of the conventions, either interpersonal conventions or just kind of songwriting conventions. Do something simple and celebratory. So that's an example of one song that I've written. And another one that I kind of had forgotten about is in this book here, The Shenandoah Harmony. I wrote it a long time ago. The story behind it is, I won't tell you the whole story, but the song is named for a woman who was born in 1850, who I have a strange connection to, partly because I found her tune book in a pile of junk. And there's all this information about her life and her favorite songs, and I sort of developed a real interest in her life and her music. And so I wrote this song in Julia, oh, sorry.
246 on the bottom.
When I was first becoming really interested in Sacred Harp singing, Shape Note singing, I got interested in the local history that related to it. I've always been really interested in what was going on right here, under my feet. And I know that you folks at the school here have been doing some of that, and I thought it might be interesting, partly in light of that, to share this song with you because it grew from a really micro local study. Where I found this book, this woman who lived in my town. The book was published in 1848, and just through that book, it was kind of opening that book that opened this whole world of local history to me. And I wound up writing a 390-page PhD dissertation based on really just opening this book and beginning with small things. And just that's been a real lesson for me, realizing that you can start anywhere. You can start with, I don't know, a plant or a house or somebody's grave or any little bit of local history, and just keep pushing it, and it really opens up the whole world. And in looking through this one woman's book, it really just blossomed further and further, expanded further and further out, and it really opened up the whole world to me. So I wrote this music to an existing text. It was the purpose behind it was definitely related to the themes of liberation and belonging. As we were beginning to sing together, a bunch of friends and I were seeking to kind of grow the community, or let people know that there was this opportunity to sing together. And we were writing new music as well as singing old music from the Sacred Harp in kind of an attempt to just establish a kind of musical center that anyone could gravitate towards if they wanted to, just like a place where they could come and feel that they could make a contribution, because that was one of the things that felt so wonderful to us. When I say us, it was there was a small group of friends who I played in punk bands with, but and had maybe saw some similar, some kind of crossover with Sacred Harp singing because it was non-commercial. It might not make sense at this time and place to think of punk music as being non-commercial because there is such a commercial presence of it, but when we were starting, it was very kind of community oriented. There is still a very community oriented face to that. Yeah.
It's like my view of music is that it involves it's this like music together, which is kind of what one of my was. It's dissolved, but because we're all basic kids, but
I can't imagine what that would have felt like.
I totally understand the community aspect of culture.
Yeah. One of the things that I didn't like about playing in the punk scene was that it was kind of a sense of belonging through exclusion. So it was saying, it was like we were writing songs that were like, oh yeah, we all agree about this. So why are we even, we're basically there's preaching to the choir. I guess there's a value in that. You make a song that just kind of, and you find that in probably all kinds of music, where the nature of the song gives you a sense of belonging, at least partially through pushing other people away. And in those days, I had my family was really neat in that they had friends from a very broad spectrum of perspectives and backgrounds, economically, socially, ethnically, and what I found, like in the media at that time, and this is going back, more than 30 years, was that anytime people started complaining, like people started complaining even in the punk scene, like, oh, these idiots. I'm like, oh, wait, that's my friends. And like, oh, those idiots. Like, oh, wait, that's also my friends. And so I found something. I've not found the perfect music. There probably is no such thing as any human creation that's like, perfect. But shape note singing came about as close as anything, probably closer than anything I've ever found, to creating an opportunity for people to come to gravitate towards it and say, wherever you're coming from, you can contribute to making this harmony. It's not a choir sound. It's not a political party. It is largely, the texts are largely Christian, and that is not for everybody, but the way that Sacred Harp singers and shape note singers in general do it is to make it as inclusive as possible. Say whatever your theological or political biases are, you can leave them at the door, and you can feel free to come here and just really concentrate on singing. Your value, your voice matters, whether it's loud or soft, in tune or not quite. So that's kind of a maybe nutshell version of, at least part of what drew me to this music. And creating this song, it was partly in celebration of some of these ideas, creating an opportunity to embody some of those practices as a growing community, and also as a source of comfort. The song there were some difficult things going on, and I found some resonance with this text, and then created this music to just potentially be of some comfort. And I hadn't thought about it in a long time, and then a couple of months ago, I got a text from a friend of mine who's a sound engineer I worked with, and he said, "Hey, did you ever do an arrangement of an Isaac Watts hymn?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he's the road manager for Sweet Honey in the Rock, the wonderful gospel group. And he was on the road with them in Chicago, and there's a women's choir that opened, and he said they were, so he sent me a little, he filmed it and sent me a little text with the video on it, and they had done an arrangement of this song, and it was so moving. And I spoke with the director the next day, and she was talking about how much the song meant to the women in this group, and that just kind of exceeded my wildest imaginations of what this little song could do. Because I got to the point where I wasn't that satisfied with it, and I hadn't thought about it in years. So that's enough about that. Maybe let's just see if we can sing it. How many people, has anybody not ever sung shape note music?
I just have, but not well.
Well, I didn't ask that. It's like a Cherokee friend of mine, a long time ago, older guy. We were driving through the outskirts of Chicago, somewhere in the depths of southern Illinois. There's a thing that said blueberry pie, and there was a sign that said, he put on his most cartoon Indian voice, said, "You want blueberry pie?" And I said, "No, I'm all right." He said, "I didn't ask you all right. I asked you want blueberry pie." Anyway, so the melody is in the tenor, so the third line from the top. It's a song of Amelia on the bottom. And I should know it. So, if you've never sung this stuff before, the shapes represent the different solfege syllables in this British solfege. So it's, instead of do, re, mi, fa, sol, ti, do, it's fa, sol, la, mi, fa. Don't worry about it too much for these purposes. We're going to be singing all day tomorrow, so if you're grabbed by the harmony here, if you haven't heard it before, come tomorrow and have more of a chance to mess with it. So the triangles are fas, the circles are sols, the las are the rectangles and their mean occasional curves. So the tune, if you don't read music, we can maybe go over it a couple of times to catch it by ear. If you know it or can read it, let's try it together. If not, just listen to it. Verse 3 might be easier for those of you who aren't accustomed to shapes. Thou wilt display that sovereign grace, whence all my comforts bring. I shall employ my lips in praise. Bass below verse 3. And if you think you're going to be singing the tune, feel free to bring that along as we go over the bass. Here we go. Notes 1, 2. Now let's look at the treble, which is the top line right above verse 1. And again, feel free to hum either the bass or the tenor if you want to keep it in mind. Here we go on the treble, 1, 2. So, 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 so. Just fine. So let's try it all together on the notes, and see if everybody feels all right. We'll just move on to some other song. Now, not going to be too high enough for the altos. Oh everything, or is that? Is that making sense?
So, the space ones and the solid ones, and then the space one with the dot, is that
Yes.
1, 2, and 3?
So the way it goes is kind of the more open and unattached it looks, the longer it lasts. The more filled in and complex it looks, the shorter it lasts. So in this, the solid ones are 1 beat.
Yeah.
The open ones are 2 beats. And if there's a dot after it, it's 3 beats. So, which is pretty much what you said. So I should have just said yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there are any sections anywhere this is.
We got the bass over there.
Yeah, no, we just start with the bases.
We got a high harmony here and an alto here.
Okay.
And
Tenor with bridge.
And again, in case you're not that familiar with Sacred Harp singing, I'm not really been going into that too much, but we sit in a hollow square provided by the 4 harmony part, so you're just surrounded by people singing the same part, and it makes life easier.
If you have a dotted quarter note, why would that just be a half note?
That's an interesting
We
thing.
can across the way.
Oh, because it adds a half of the value before it.
Oh, so it's a 3/16.
So it's like if you have a quarter note, it adds an eighth.
Yeah.
And if you have a half, it adds a quarter.
Gotcha.
I never thought about it.
Doing that for a second.
Try the words, let's do it on the words, huh? Here we go, 1, 2.
This joy is love, my all in all, that I give thee to mine. Thou wilt not let me lower fall, and none can higher find. Was roughly a contemporary of Bach, and he was one of the original mashup artists. So at the time, a lot of people only sang the song of David, because that was like a song of Bach. That's all they sang. And then he like mashed up the Psalms with the New Testament Gospel of Jesus and made like combos. And he made thousands of them. So if you look in the back of any hymnal, he's usually the top hit writer, including these.
So then, was your job, you did the music part?
Yeah.
How do you hear all 4 parts? Where you got help?
Well, I'm really melody oriented, so and I think that's true for a lot of people who are Sacred Harp oriented, who didn't study harmony particularly. So I have to have a tune, and then typically the way people have done it is then you add a bass, and then once you have that provides a kind of a roadmap. And then the treble, you might fill in a little bit here and there, you might change it, and then the alto is usually the last one to go. And that's, I know it's been common, I found with a lot of Sacred Harp, people write Sacred Harp type songs. So it's kind of four melodies that you try not to make them sound too bad together.
Right. Is it that simple? Is it by ear?
Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Some people can hear all four at once.
So when we were trying to work with some Shape Note stuff and put it together, we started with the melody and the
Yeah.
bass. But because I'm from a music theory background, I did think in terms of harmony, which we wanted to make the lines individually melodic, but I was trying to fit them into certain chords as it went along. And sometimes it was successful, and sometimes it was not.
I've heard that from people. Yeah, I've heard that before. You're not going to bring your song in.
Tim, I wonder, you mentioned just kind of in passing almost about this song, you writing at a time where tough things were going on in your life, and this being a way to find comfort, and belonging, and maybe a sense of freedom or liberty. And I think that's something many people find in Shape Note singing. It's not uncommon where someone, whether they're standing in the center of the square or on the periphery, is just leaving. And it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you can sense that there's it's a structure and a tradition that can hold that suffering, that can hold that hardship, that can hold vulnerability. And it's an interesting thing because in the beginning, as you're learning this or you're struggling through a new tune, one's focused so hard on just getting your line right, you can hardly relax into the experience of the melody or the experience of community or the kind of feeling painted by the text. But something, I guess, as one continues in the discipline of it and finds the form enough within yourself, then that experience kind of opens.
It's an amazing tradition in that it does, as you're saying, it's able to hold all this. It's kind of a container that whatever people bring to it, whatever ideas or beliefs about the world, or pain, or joy, something about the music, but also the way that we do it. The fact that there's not a lot of talking. There's hardly any talking. When you go to Sacred Harp singing, maybe a brief, very simple prayer of welcoming, sort of an opening, and then bathrooms are there, the coffee's over there, and there's maybe, say grace at dinner time, a lot of hugging, and then sort of a parting kind of benediction, and that's it as far as talking goes for the most part. And the rest, it's amazing when you go to singing how much is there. It sometimes can be overwhelming because there's so many people each coming with their own thing, and in a context where you can really you can cry, or you can, it can be a little off-putting, or maybe not off-putting, but surprising for people who haven't seen it before. That there might be somebody sitting there crying just on their own next to somebody, and nobody's going, "Oh, are you all right?" It's just like, "Oh, that happens." And I hope that, just that thought would give you some encouragement about ways of engaging with music, just recognizing that that's a possibility, that, it's talking about liberation. It's a constraint. We can't do that. It's an unnecessary constraint. It's just something that somehow over time culturally developed, that we decided, well, you don't do that. Or if you do, it's like, oh, wow, why was she crying? Well, why weren't you crying? Did you not notice what's going on?
Tim, do you have any insight into what might be barriers to expression? Right? Like I'm sure it's different for everybody, and different cultures are different, right?
Wow, what a question.
But I'm like, I direct music at our church, And so it's something I've given a lot of thought to. And I don't know if just our community is particularly stoic, or, you know, I mean, everybody has, you know, a different personal situation, and I'm not inside other people's heads, but I just wondered if you could speak to that. What are barriers to expression, and what can we do to overcome that?
I have an idea on how to deal with that without me talking. Which is one of the things that when I've taught songwriting before, I've taught songwriting courses, and I've written some songs that I really like, I'm really proud of. Those two, actually. Although, to be honest, that last one, to really be excited about it, I had to have heard from these people for whom it meant something. And that was, I didn't really mention that this woman was saying how much it meant to the women in these choirs that she was. I'm like, what, really? And the thing she also figured out is that singing it with all women, changing the key and putting it all in one octave, it sounds way better. The harmonies work way better. So I was like, whoa, that was cool. But talking about barriers to expression, one of the things that I'm kind of interested in is getting inspiration from other people to knock down some of my own barriers, because I don't write songs unless I have to, usually. So I'm open to any suggestions from people who have, you know, their own reasons or their own ways of getting into that process. And one of the ways that I've messed with in trying to teach it is kind of parody or kind of vampire songs, where you find you take an existing song and what's that?
It's called a tribute.
A tribute. Well, contrafactum is the fancy academic word. This is something that people did a lot. One of the songs I might look at this evening in the presentation I'm doing about it, partly considering the use of existing music in the American abolition movement, abolition of slavery, was taking familiar songs and rewriting the lyrics, and that's something that happens all the time. You know, think of like school songs that you have. I don't know. You guys, you probably don't have a school bus at this school?
Not yet.
Not yet. Once you get a school bus, then you have to have songs to go on the school bus. You also have to probably have more of an antagonistic relationship with your school in order to come up with parody songs. But you're probably familiar with the idea of, you know, taking a song and kind of making a parody. Well, not all parodies are meant to be humorous. They're political parodies, and there's a Shape Note song that, one example of a song that they used in the abolition movement was they took My Country 'Tis of the Sweet Land of Liberty and they changed it to My Country 'Tis of the Dark Land of Slavery. So it was kind of an interesting way of both celebrating, you know, Americanness, but also challenging an idea of practice within it. So taking an existing tune and then coming up with new words, and then what I then had people do is that now you got new words and make a new tune for it, and there you have something a totally new song. And doesn't address the idea of openness necessarily, but it does hopefully maybe provide a little window into that, drawing out. So I want to do that. There's a song called "Better Days Coming" that I like, and I want to teach it to you, and then I want to take a little time. And it's very simple. It's got a chorus that goes, "Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming and we'll sound the jubilee." So let's try to sing that. "Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming and we'll sound the jubilee. Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming and we'll sound the jubilee." So having a good chorus is a great way to engage people. That was something that, within this context of sacred singing in America, people realized in the great outdoor religious revivals of the late 18th and through the 19th century that, you know, the quickest way in is one of the quickest way in is a good chorus, also a catchy tune. And so there are a lot of songs like this where you just have a rhymed couplet, just like one rhyme, and then it's followed by this chorus. And in addition to making it possible to use existing text if you had songs that were songs where you had just a rhymed couplet. It also made it possible to create new rhymes, so you could do something on the spot. So what I want to do is get this melody in your head, and then take 10 minutes or so and get another couple of rhymed couplets of your own that maybe that relate to this general theme of the chorus. There's better days coming. Will you go along with me? There's better days coming. We'll sound the Jubilee. The Jubilee is as you were saying yesterday. In this context, it's a sacred context, but it's celebration basically. And in the abolition context, it was called the abolition of slavery. They were singing about the Jubilee as abolition. So, sing a couple of verses. The glorious time is rolling on, and sinners will come flocking home. Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming, and we'll sound Jubilee. I long to hear the joyful sound. The dead's alive, the lost is found. Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming, and we'll sound Jubilee. Oh, come now, sister, will you go and see what love from yonder flow? Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming, and we'll sound Jubilee. I long to reach that happy shore where sorrow and sorrows are no more. Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming, and we'll sound Jubilee. Oh, come now, brothers, come and tell the glories of Emmanuel. Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming, and we'll sound Jubilee. Oh, there's better days coming when you go along with me. Yes, there's better days coming, and we'll sound Jubilee. Rhythm is another thing, of course. As what you're saying, when you relax into the song or you rest in the song, I think it's a great way of putting it. But rhythm is another thing that gets you there that you'll find in Sacred Harp singing. It's very, very important. That might be discouraged in other kinds of music. It draws you in. It keeps you engaged. So, having done that now, if you could just, I don't know if you got pen and paper, or a computer, or a phone, or just in your mind, think about that theme of what would you like to be free from? What would you like to see the world free from? Just a rhymed couplet. Kind of 8 or 7, you can squeeze the tune different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We're working in little groups.
Sure. If you want to work on your own, or I don't know what natural groups would be. Somebody presumably in a group would have some sort of writing influence. But I don't know if you want to just go by who's closest, or.
I've got paper if you want a pen.
I've got a pen.
I've got both.